Okay, I call the meeting to order at 4:40 p.m. The Administration and Public Works Committee meeting of the Evanston City Council. Apologies, my minutes has gone by. May I have a motion can I have the roll first?
Recording in progress.
To what?
The roll.
Oh, I'll do the roll. Councilmember Kelly. Here. Councilmember Braithwaite. Councilmember Nusma.
Here.
Councilmember Burns. Councilmember Reed.
Here. Okay, with a quorum present, we're ready to do our business. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the April 11th, 2022 Administration and Public Works Committee meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Kelly, seconded by Councilmember Nusma. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. And then do we have anyone signed up for public comments?
We do, but, sir, I believe we have to take a roll call on all votes if somebody is virtual.
We don't, but I'm fine with that. So we can do a roll call.
It's up to you, Chair, if you don't think we need to. I just wanted to bring it to your attention.
Okay. We can keep going for now. Do we have public comment?
We do have public comment. Two people, Mr. Vasilko and Ms. Payton.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Vasilko.
Thank you. On the bills list, there are two items I'd like somebody to explain. One is, why are we spending roughly $7,600 a month for a security guard service at Robert Crown? I mean, why is Crown different than any other recreation building? I don't think you're hiring security guards at all the other recreation buildings. Secondly, why are we still paying the former architect of that project, the Robert Crown Center? There's another $17,750 on the bills list for them. So it seems that's a few years back now. They should have been paid out everything by now. And by the way, are they paying for repairing? There's thousands of square feet of cracked concrete floors in that building. I'm wondering if that architect and the contractor are going to be paying for that. I also would like to know, since it's been a while, what's the status of the individual who is going to be hired to oversee the ARPA funds spending? You know, what was budgeted for that person? Has that person been hired? It's important because we're already spending or designating most of the ARPA funds for different things. That person should be on board by now, I would think. There's also A14 through A21 that's selling off a lot of city property, and I know it's adjacent to some private residences, but shouldn't this property sale be more public, like a public auction or something, versus just negotiating behind the scenes with an adjacent property owner? I'd also like the chair, and maybe the few aldermen that are there, to explain why no other council member 2 weeks ago stood with Council Member Kelly to put on hold the no-bid $75,000 annual unspecified spending contract handed to Ford Space, despite staff admitting publicly that staff misled the council on that matter. Nobody stood with Council Member Kelly, and I'm not that you're here, you know, Council Member Nusma, you're here, Chair Reed, a few others that aren't. I'm just very curious why you would let something like that go by without challenging what could have been savings in that regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vasilko. Ms. Payton, you're up next.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Where is A22 and A23 on the agenda for this meeting? It's for action on City Council, but not discussed here. These are very serious changes. This should have been discussed in the Housing Subcommittee before it was for action. I object to several items in this ordinance. It needs to be held in committee and discussed with public, owners, or managers, which will affect us. I also object to the notification of new rules and codes stating that there will be notified via email or the city website. This is inappropriate for this kind of ordinance to be approved and no notification or discussion with people that it will affect. Section 105.3 right of entry is questionable, and it mentions other things like moving the breaker box for people to have access without talking to a maintenance person. These are very serious changes, and I would have to spend thousands of dollars making changes in order to be with code. The subcommittee has been talking about registration versus licensing when it was suggested by me and others that we need to focus on improving the inspection process. Not one time did Ms. Schnur state these changes were coming up. Again, this should be held in committee for discussion, not voted for action. A23 should not be voted on today in City Council. This is very serious and it should be held in committee or by the subcommittee for discussion. Thank you, and Black Lives Matter.
Thank you, Ms. Payton. Is there any further public comment? If there's no further public comment, then we will move on to the next agenda item, which is the consent agenda. Can I have someone move are there any items folks would like to remove from the consent agenda? I'll give a minute for that.
I'd like to remove A1. I'm sorry. Yeah, A1.
Council for action tonight.
Chair.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Kelly requests to remove A1. This is Councilmember Nusma. I would like to remove A5 and A7, please.
Okay. Is there anything else?
I also have, I'm not sure how this works, but there's A22 and A23. How does that, but that hasn't come up through APW?
They were, agenda items A22 and A23 were introduced at APW last month, or I'm sorry, on April 11th, and accepted at City Council on April 11th. And
Thank
so they only go back to the City Council for action tonight.
Okay, thank you very much.
And just a heads up, I'm going to hold A23 for, A22 at council.
Okay.
Okay, seeing,
Can you go over the list again? That's what's being held back?
1, 5, and 7.
157.
and I'd like to remove A3. I'm sorry, A2. As well as A3. Okay, seeing nothing else, that leaves,
So, Mr. Chair, I will move the consent item, the consent agenda, which now consists of items A4, A6, A8, A9, A10, and A11. And does not include A1, 2, 3, 5, and 7.
thank you. Okay, it's been properly moved, or it's been moved by Councilmember Nusma. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Kelly. The consent agenda is now moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
My apologies. I mean, I've called the vote. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, any abstentions? None. I did want to remove A13 but that is fine. We can discuss that. at
A13 is for consideration anyway, so,
Thank you.
right? We're only
Yes.
approving through A11.
Apologies. Yep, great.
Got it.
Okay. Great, the consent agenda has been approved. That takes us back to item A1, which was removed. I think Councilmember Kelly removed that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd also like.
Do you mind moving it first?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'd like to move item A1.
Moved by Councilmember Kelly,
I'll
seconded
second.
by Councilmember Nisma. Councilmember Kelly.
So could we, I don't, if Ms. Biggs or somebody could explain the $7,670, the monthly security guard for Robert Crown? It does seem like a lot. I don't know what we're spending on other public centers, but if someone could, I mean, that's, and annually, what that cost, what that additional cost is that we'll be incurring for that? That is account number 62509. And one moment, and I'll go through. Is there anybody who can?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
So I'd like to, so this is we'd like to approve spending $7,600 a month in security for Robert Crown, correct?
That's on the bills list, yes.
Right, so I just want to get a better understanding of this need and how it relates to other public facilities. And so this would be yet another cost on the Robert Crown Center.
Sure. Good evening, Luke Stowe, Interim Deputy City Manager. Director Thompson's not here at the moment, so I'm jumping in for Parks and Rec. My understanding is that the security is for partly because of the hours at Crown. It's 7 days a week and open till 11, midnight, or 1 o'clock. So that's my understanding. I would have to have the invoice in front of me to be able to look at it in more detail, but that's my understanding. Dave, if you want to add to that or not, but.
Does anybody know what we spend on other, like, for the Civic Center? I'm just, even though this is much larger, I'm just wondering. It seems like, just as
No,
a
I don't,
comparable to have an idea. I mean, it does seem like it's going to be yet another large expense.
I'm not sure what we pay for the security at the Civic Center at this point in time. We can try to get those answers and provide them to you before the council meeting.
Okay.
Okay, and then, okay, and then I also have a question about that, why we're still paying the architect for the Robert Crown? Why are we still paying out $17,000, almost $18,000 for the architect for Robert Crown? What does that entail, the work?
So, council members, my name is Laura Biggs. I'm the city engineer. The contract for Robert Crown is really large, and it takes a long time to close out. And most of the closeout items are things like getting copies of O&M manuals, completing staff training, warranty, punch list. And so some of that work is still going on. I believe this is the final payment for the architect.
So that wouldn't be staff training, though, I mean, for an architect. So I'm just wondering, what work does this relate to?
I believe that we were holding this until we received a certain sign-off on some of the O&M manuals and punch list items, and we have received that sign-off from the architect, and so their contract is complete.
Okay, so is this above what we had originally agreed to then? I mean, I'm just trying to understand why
No.
we're. Okay, all right, thank you. And then, I did notice when I was there for an event for Dr. Witherspoon, just the cracks in the floors, so how is that being handled?
That
While we're on this
is,
topic.
that when you have a polished concrete floor, that it typically does develop cracking, which is shrinkage cracking, because when concrete cures, it shrinks, and so you do tend to get some shrinkage
But it's,
cracking.
I mean, they're major cracks.
So I have looked at it, and when I compare it to other facilities I've seen with really large expanses of concrete floor, it is within the realm of shrinkage cracking that you would expect.
Okay, I'll send you, I have photos of it. So this just is going to be like that? Like, I mean, they're really long, they run in the lobby, so we just have cracks in the lobby.
Yes, but that is pretty standard if you have a large concrete floor, because concrete shrinks when it cures.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions regarding?
No.
Nope, okay. A1 has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? A1 has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Great. May I have a motion for item A2? I remove that from the,
Mr. Chair, I'll move item A2, approval of the contract award with Christy Weber and Company Landscape for the 2022 citywide landscape maintenance in the amount of $83,975.
been moved by Councilmember Newsome, seconded by Councilmember Burns. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I will ask for a roll call on this one.
Councilmember Nusma,
Aye.
Councilmember Burns,
Aye.
Councilmember Reed,
No.
Councilmember Kelly.
It moves forward to council with a neutral recommendation. Okay, that brings us to item A5, I believe.
Sorry, I just have to ask one thing, may I, about that last item?
Nope,
I-
sorry, it's already,
Okay.
we'll discuss it afterward if you want.
Mr. Chair, I'll move item A3, approval of
Yes.
a contract award with Herrera Landscape and Snow Removal Incorporated for park mowing services in the amount of $32,400.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Nusma, seconded by Councilmember
Second.
Burns. Thank you. Okay, so I removed this from the consent agenda. I just wanted to get an update. We have moved that we would not start mowing until June, correct? That we would not mow during May? That was what the committee asked for last time?
The committee asked us for a price to not mow until June. It was not moved that we would not mow until June. Staff does not recommend that we wait that long. There are soccer fields out there that wouldn't get mowed. We're also concerned about the residents that use the parks, and we know from 2019, they're concerned when we were unable to mow because of just weather conditions. We received over 30 complaints about the length of the grass at that time. So, again, it's the committee's decision, but staff does not recommend that.
Councilmember Nusma, and then Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I love the idea of a no-mow May. I think that's something we should consider for next year when we're laying out the budget and making our plans for next year. Given the fact that we have soccer fields in this contract, those need to get mowed. And I do think the no-mow May is a good idea that needs some more community input, some community education. So I'm going to vote to approve A3 and approve the mowing for this year, but, commit to having a conversation about revisiting that for next year.
Thank you. Councilmember Kelly.
In response to you said you had 30 resident complaints about long grass in the parks? Not the soccer fields, I understand. This is sort of, except barring sports fields, 30 complaints just about park areas?
Yes, in 2019, because of the weather, the amount of rain, we were unable to mow, and we received over 30 complaints in 2019 about the length of the grass. So the people that use the shelters for picnics and things like that, they were the ones that were complaining to us about the length of the grass. So.
Okay. Because I do wonder, I've received numerous emails also about no mow May, so I don't know how that stacks up compared to, and what the other council members here, if you've also received, I'm sure. So I'm sure it's comparable, at least, expressions of wanting to hold off from cutting the grass for 1 month, but thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, I think this is for Harbor Park, Twiggs Park, and Butler Park. Twiggs Park and Butler Park are in the 5th Ward. They are fields that are programmed, not just with soccer fields, but last year there was the YMCA and I think Digital Divas also programmed this area for middle school students and doing kind of outdoor summer camp programming. And, I think we all know we need to do a better job incorporating our CARP goals as well as our racial equity goals into everything we do. And so I'm more interested in figuring out how to implement a citywide program to address the kind of chief concern with this action and not continuing to do one-off things, especially in areas that are programmed. And as Councilmember Newsome said, we've done zero education on this. It's just not the time to do it. But long-term, I think absolutely we need to try to incorporate these methods into everything that we do. I talked to Leslie Shad, who I think led this effort. And while she would love us to move forward with it, I think she understands. She would also like us to see us adopt, again, a more encompassing program that could address this citywide. And she agreed that I think these conversations really should start off when we bid these contracts. They should be ingrained into the contract itself. And we really need to start much earlier than on doing that. So I think this is something we can pass for this year. But as I told Leslie Shad, let's start now working on it next year. And I think we can maybe meet with Leslie and Kara Pratt and anyone else who's interested to try to figure out how we can start to adopt some of that for next year.
Thank you. Councilmember Kelly, can we close this discussion out? Okay. I agree. I think doing this, on a citywide level next year, so I think I'm hoping staff is hearing the direction and the desire of this body to next year have a citywide program where we look at reducing the amount of mowing that we're doing. Okay. With that, Councilmember Kelly.
And Chair, I also just wanted to quickly say that I also asked Leslie if this was in the CARP plan, and it is. So this has already been discussed. We just need to work towards it.
Councilmember Kelly.
So I'm sure that there's some areas where there's zero programming in this. Can't we do a little pilot this year on a few? I mean, I don't see any reason, and it would be to select a few areas as a pilot this year that are unprogrammed parkland, where we don't have any. I just think to get it going, just like we did with the beaches, we had 2 days. I think this year, if we found a few, so it's equitably, 2 or 3 areas of public land that is not programmed, so that we can at least do a pilot this year. So next year, if we want to go, more broadly, we've sort of piloted a little bit. I think that would be in line.
I think if I can just quickly answer, I think and this is that with these are 3 specific parks. It's not an overall. It's not all of our parks, and so it'd be difficult to do that kind of targeted approach with this particular contract. Right. Okay.
And I'm looking forward to having this conversation, more broadly with regards to all of the city's parkland. How can we implement,
parkland,
appropriate,
parkways,
sustainable gardening practices? So it's more than just a no mow May conversation, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I think we should, separate from this, it would be good if we could pilot at least some areas. It seems like in Evanston this year, right now for May, before we go forward more broadly next year.
Well, I guess to that question, there are your staff in the Public Works Department, and Forestry, I think, is also under Public Works.
Yes.
Your staff does maintain the parkways, correct?
The parkways next to city property, we're not all over town, no.
Okay. Then maybe that's something we could discuss with your department this year. The stuff that the city does, we can look into that, and maybe we can have that discussion at some point.
Yes, and if I may, good evening, Chair Reed, members of the committee, Edgar Cano, Acting Public Works Agency Director. We're definitely open for conversation. Whenever we do enact anything, I would like to set the expectations for the public so that we can minimize any of the concerns, the 311s or anything, and the emails to you as well, and then just taking a direct and educated approach to it. So now, and again, there are a lot of concerns with this, with litter control that could come from it, damage to equipment from things that could be buried in it. But again, there's a lot of concerns that we can discuss, and we can see if we can manage those in some way.
Thank you. And again, I think that's a great reason why it might be good to pilot one small area so we can find out all that comes with it. So, I mean, I'd be willing even to park near my house to survey neighbors and.
We can try it in the 1st and 8th Ward if that's a possibility. All right. Thank you, Councilmember Kelly. Thank you, everyone. All those in favor say aye. All those
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. That is item A3. Item A5.
Mr. Chair, I'll move item A5, approval of the contract with Suburban Tree Consortium for the purchase of trees and planting services for spring 2022. This is in the amount of $75,614.35.
Moved by Councilmember Nusma, seconded by Councilmember Burns. Any discussion on this item?
I just wanted to talk publicly about some questions that I had answered by staff earlier today. If Mr. Callahan is here, or Mr. Kano. If we could talk first about the number of trees, and I know this is going to come up in conversation later this evening with regards to carp. 216 trees on this plan. We have a goal of 500 net new trees by 2025. So how do these 216 trees play into that carp goal?
Okay. Good afternoon, Chairperson Reed and everyone else here on the council, on the committee. Michael Callahan, I'm the former forestry supervisor and city arborist. I'm the current assistant director of recreation, parks and recreation. So we remove approximately 330, 340 trees a year. This 216 trees we're proposing to plant this spring is a little bit more than what we typically do. We're trying to bump that up, although the biggest concerns that I have is that we try to keep the trees in the middle size and larger size alive longer, because that's where we're actually obtaining our positive goals for carp. Losing one large tree, there's no way we can make up for it with planting. It doesn't matter if we plant 200, 300 trees, it does not replace the one large tree. So this, trying to get 500 trees in the positive, it sounds good, and it is a very nice goal to have, but that means we're probably going to have to bump up our planting, probably at least double over the next few years at least, to be able to compensate for that.
And even then, we'd be replacing a mature tree that you have to take down with a baby tree, which is really no comparison in terms of benefit.
No, the benefits, it's going to take 40, 50 years minimum to get some of the benefits to start to equate to losing some of these trees that we currently are.
But nothing wrong with planting more baby trees.
No, there's nothing wrong with it. It's definitely something that we want to do and we're continued to do, and that is something that the city has always been committed for doing. The big thing is that we have to be able to maintain and care for them. So it's not just planting the tree, it's the maintenance of the trees after that. So we have to maintain the trees a little bit more than what you typically would, so that we can train the trees so that they're not going to grow up and basically have structural issues and other problems. So if we can't train the tree correctly, we're going to have limited success. So the big thing is to make sure that we have our processes and enough staffing to be able to adequately be able to care for those trees.
So as we look ahead to future conversations and budget conversations for 2023, does it make more sense to invest in maintenance rather than planting new trees? You'd like to do both, obviously, but
both is optimal. And 2020, 2021, we actually initiated a plant health care program in the forestry department, to where we actually shifted some resources to actually mitigating some of the stresses that are placed on our urban trees. So we've actually started a tree care type program to actually help mitigate this. It's too early to see, a lot of the results, but I mean, we are seeing, positive aspects of that. So we are doing that. It's just it takes away resources from doing routine maintenance. So, I mean, obviously, we would prefer to have planting and maintenance if we could afford it.
Yeah. And if you could speak to the mix of trees that we're planting.
Sure. So we offered 20 tree species this spring, and that's very unusual for most municipalities. Most municipalities only offer 5 or 7 key trees that they offer. We've upped it to 20 for this spring. I believe we were at 15 last year. We're trying to give as much of a selection as possible to the community members so that they can actually get what they want. We actually switched from a method of where people would call in and we would purchase the trees first, and then we'd have them call in, and whatever we have, we would supply until we ran out. We switched to an online ordering form for 2021-22, where people put in their orders so that we can then try to get those trees that we can provide better service to the community, and that's been very well received. We want to focus on native trees to Illinois, a little bit farther south even, because with climate change, we're going to see some issues with survival rates. So we are going to offer non-natives as well, though. We do get a lot of requests for that. There is a landscaping component that's involved with that, but we want to mix up the species as much as possible.
Great, thank you.
You have a question? Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, just on the maintenance part, so these are trees, some of these trees are in the parkways as well, right? We're getting these to the parkways?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
How do we maintain it? And is there partnership with the homeowner in some cases?
The forestry staff maintains the trees in the city parkways and the larger trees in the parks. The Greenways Division handles the smaller trees in the parks.
Wow.
So we have a section pruning schedule that we started in 2021 and is going on right now in 2022. So we've identified areas in the city that we are basically pruning every single tree in that block.
And I guess
we can
probably
maximize
maintain it is not
efficiency.
the way to put it, but who's taking care of the little trees, the baby trees as we've described them?
The little trees, we ask members of the community to water when we need them to be watered. When we have severe drought or times of dry spells, we've had very mixed success with that. There's a lot of pushback of, we pay taxes for that. So staffing wise, we try to supplemental water when we can. We also do a humate and root stimulant that we do on the newly planted trees, but unfortunately, we just don't have the ability to water the trees as often as we would like.
Do we know how many we're losing, over the last few years? Do we know a percentage?
So it depends on the year. If we have a really severe dry spell, we could lose 20-30%.
Okay. Yeah, just let us know next time, because it doesn't have to be the neighbor that lives right next to it, to water it. And so if you let us know what trees need watering, if we can come up with some map or way to identify these places, I think, we could get that outreach through in our newsletters, and I think we can distribute what the different trees are a lot broadly than we may have been doing to try to save them. So I just wanted to add that note. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a quick question for the Caesar Milan of trees, the tree trainer. I am curious about our. Do we ever plant trees that produce food, that are fruiting trees?
So we do not typically do that in the parkway for multiple reasons. One is a lot of the fruit, the soft fruit like apples or pears, that sort of thing, it ends up being a mess. What doesn't get consumed ends up falling on the streets. You get slick areas, you get falling on people's cars, you get a lot of like yellow jackets in the fall that are attracted to that, and that's a nuisance there. So we typically don't do that on the parkways. There are certain areas around town where it has been done. There are some nut-producing trees that have been planted around town, mainly pecan trees. So there are some of those, but that's because the fruit is a smaller fruit that's more acceptable. So we don't really have an urban garden in that sense, just because of the maintenance that's required for that, and they require different pruning. And from a liability standpoint, we don't necessarily want children or adults climbing the trees trying to actually get the fruit off of it. If we have a limb breakage or a situation like that, then we could be, potentially liable.
Thank you. I'd love to, at some point, this isn't necessarily a discussion here, but maybe in the future, have that discussion as we're looking to purchase and plant more trees, to think about what can we do to give trees that provide nutrients, and look at that liability in the future. Any further questions on this? Thank you, Councilmember Nusma, for bringing some of those stats out, and Councilmember Burns for your questions. It's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, any abstentions? Seeing none, the item passes. That brings us to item A7. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll move item A7, approval of sole source 4-year contract with Simple Recycling Illinois for textile collection services to Evanston community members. This will cost $0. Instead, the city will receive 50 cents per scheduled pickup.
Okay. Moved by Councilmember Nusma, seconded by Councilmember Burns. Someone, I think Councilmember Nusma?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I could just ask some questions about how this fits into our CART plan and what we are going to do to promote this to the community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, Council members. I'm Brian Zimmerman, the Solid Waste Coordinator for the city under the Public Works Department. So I'll start with the communication part. There's no cost that is expected to be endued burden on the city to provide. It's supposed to be just promoted through normal channels like we do with other services, like our yard waste program, recycling, those types of avenues, newsletters, e-releases, those types of things. They only put a contingent to try to keep it somewhat frequent, 6 times a year, so just to kind of keep it in public's view that they are able to use this optional program. This does help provide some avenue for collecting primarily textile materials, so clothing, drapery, tablecloths, things that have had a challenge in the world of getting to more advantageous beneficial uses after they're deemed to be wasteful materials. So finding ways to recycle things that might be of poor quality into things like insulation or other types of infill materials, like fiberglass, those types of things, as well as finding some small markets of reuse to be resold at other places or donated to other establishments. So this is primarily geared to provide another added convenience source for residents that might not participate in other programs like using Goodwill or Salvation Army, those institutions. This is more trying to just give one more step to groups to get off the sidelines and participate and help us divert more material from landfills.
And it's more than just textiles that can be recycled.
They do accept, their primary function is textiles. That's the thing they promote the most, but they will be willing to accept other materials that they will try to find beneficial uses for, ranging from utensils like silverware, like I mentioned, tapestry, tablecloths, those materials as well. They will take a few small house electronics because, as you can imagine, people will put out just about anything when they find out some of these programs exist, and having those outlets kind of in place will make it easier instead of just sending that stuff straight to the landfill once they get it.
So usable household electronics as opposed to the 17-inch black and white TV in the attic that might as well just...
Yeah, they're looking for more smaller scale materials. They do not want things, they state that they want stuff that's under 50 pounds. That's being picked up. Those larger scale appliances should be going through those normal e-waste providers. Swank and the City of Evanston do the Evanston Recycles Day. Those are perfect avenues that residents should be continuing to utilize.
So not old CFL light bulbs and not old batteries.
No, those
it's not that stuff.
Those should be finding more productive uses to be recycled by those types of providers.
Okay. So as we think about promoting this, I'm sure there'll be a press release, and let's put something on the webpage that makes it very clear this is what is acceptable in this program and this is what's not.
Yeah, I will mostly try to make a point that is a textile program because that is their bread and butter, what they're best at doing.
And we don't have to pre-sort cotton from polyester, it just all goes in the same.
No,
it goes in a bag, a special bag?
They made it pretty easy for residents. They can put it in a bag, they can put it in a box, as long as they're labeling it to indicate to the pickup that it is meant for simple recycling. They aren't going to pick up Amazon boxes or anything like that are on people's stoops. They are looking for things to be indicated for them to pick up on their scheduled pickup days.
Great, thank you. Okay.
Councilmember Burns.
Hey, man, all right. And so what are they getting from the city in a sense? I know we're getting 50 cents or whatever it was, 5 cents. What are we're approving this to do what? What do they need from us? Is it that we agree to promote this or what are we going to do?
Yeah, it's primarily the promotion. It is also some of that if we have collection events like Evanston Recycles Day and we want to collect textiles at that, we will usually defer to them to be our first option for those events. They are also willing, but we haven't yet picked a spot, but they were willing to establish a drop-off location somewhere in the city that they will service once a week. So those avenues, they're just getting more material. That's really what it comes down to, that they're establishing an agreement that they can operate within the city, be promoted by the city, to collect more of that material from their residents.
And is this a nonprofit, for-profit?
They are a for-profit company.
Okay. And what do they do with it once they get it? Is this a lucrative endeavor for them? Do you understand the economics behind this?
It's not clear cut given that they're a for-profit company, but they primarily promote that they send about 20% of their materials resold in other markets. So go into another donation center or to be a resold store. Then they primarily do a lot of recycling of material. So I mentioned they make stuff into insulation or other products. There is a small contingent that is just such poor quality, and this is contingent on what the material they get, but it's such poor quality that they don't find another use for, and it does end up going back to the landfill. But it's a smaller contingent piece of the pie.
It would be great to introduce them to Nathan Norman, just to see if there are job opportunities.
What was the name?
Nathan Norman.
Oh yeah, Nathan.
Yeah, just if there are job opportunities, we should try to connect Evanston residents with those opportunities.
I will. I'll bring that up to them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman.
Thank you.
This is a great program. Excited that we're going to have this, and excited to see the schedule. It's been properly moved and seconded, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, any abstentions, seeing none. That brings us to item A12.
Councilmember Burns would want to make the motion on that. I'd be
Yes.
happy to second.
I guess I could just say so moved, but
So moved, okay.
yeah, there we go.
Seconded by
Second.
Councilmember Newsome. So this is ordinance 33022, approval of the proposed First Amendment to the 5/5 redevelopment project area. Is there any discussion on this?
Do we need to vote to suspend the rules, or that's at council?
Not a committee. Yeah, thank you. Okay, seeing no
And
discussion.
this is just a cleanup, right?
Correct. That's my understanding. It's pretty straightforward. I don't know if Paul is here and wants to give a very brief explanation of this, but it's pretty simple. Hey, Paul.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm sorry I'm up in my office. I was on a call. I should be down there, and my apologies. There are 2 PIN numbers that were added to the PIN list in error. It's not an amendment to the map. There were 2 PINs that should not have been on the PIN list. It's considered a Scrivener's error. We would delete those from the PIN list. Nothing would change in terms of how the TIF operates. The map doesn't change. Again, it was 2 PINs that were actually in the middle of the West Evanston TIF. I still don't know even how they made the list.
Okay, seeing no lights. Councilmember Keller.
So just to confirm, these are completely separate, non-adjacent, correct?
they're not adjacent to they're in an area that, even if you drew the map, it wouldn't have pulled them in. So I'm still at a loss for how they made it into the pin list. But it is, we want to make sure that the ordinance reflects the proper pin list, so we needed to amend the official ordinance to have the proper pins in it.
Okay, thanks. While we're here, when does the West End expire, the West End TIF?
The West Evanston TIF expires in 2029, if I have that right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further questions on this item, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, the item passes. Item A13, Ordinance 30-022, amending City Code Section 10-4, stopping, standing, and parking.
Mr. Chair, I will move item A13.
Moved by Councilmember
Second.
Nusma, seconded by Councilmember Burns. Is there any discussion on this item? I have discussion, but I'll start off with.
Hello, Councilmember Reed, members of the committee. I'm here to answer any questions. So we're bringing back the ordinance with the alteration which was asked in the Public Works Committee, in the City Council. So we remove from the ordinance the B plate, which is right now we can only have the passenger plate, and FP plate will apply for the commercial parking permit.
And FP plates are used only for passenger vehicles.
Passenger vehicles, this is something new, but it started 2 years ago. For the fleet, you own a lot of vehicles, or you lease a lot of vehicles. There's an outlet right now to use the FP plate. Usually this is for the rental companies, for the passenger companies. Sometimes you can have a bigger truck with an FP plate, but this is very rarely happen. And I think this is only applied to the companies, not to the personal people who can buy. They cannot purchase the FP plate. It has to be part of the larger fleet of the vehicles.
Great.
So could you have like the equivalent to a Class B, like 8,000-pound truck and have an FP plate? Are those already removed, like even if you had a truck of that size, those have been exempted?
This is a very tricky question, because can you purchase the vehicle with the FP plate? No. Can the company assign the vehicle with you with the FP plate? This kind of gray area, then you can actually get the permit. But I don't think this will be very, very more common. It will be unlikely that somebody have the take-home car, which will be FP plate with the 8,000, big box truck.
And so just so I understand, so FP plate, like what would be the most common?
So most common is the minivans, the rental company, or for example, rental cars like passengers sedans. Usually they're like the managers or the salesperson take-home cars who are just seen as a commercial right now, but they're just regular cars. Okay. So that's the cars which we try to address, which residents and the council member have issue with.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. With the direction that, if there's no other committee member, with the direction that this has gone, I really look at this and now cannot support this. To me now, it doesn't make sense if we're eliminating the B plates, which were the vehicles that we were actually concerned about as far as, not a fan of this term, but as far as the, causing a nuisance in our neighborhood, I'll say. I would be fine. In fact, I don't think that a passenger vehicle or a regular sized fleet vehicle should have to pay more to park in the city. I think the vehicles that we were really concerned about were the larger vehicles, the larger B plate vehicles in particular. And so now I think we've kind of gone wayward from what we were really trying to address. I think the real thing we're trying to address is that someone who has a small vehicle, that it happens to be a fleet vehicle, should not be dinged as that car being seen as a commercial vehicle and then not being able to park on the streets in front of their house. And then we also want to make sure that, large kind of unwieldy vehicles that put more strain on our infrastructure, that have in many cases, a higher environmental impact and all of that stuff, that those folks are also, paying their fair share to maintain the infrastructure. And so because I think we've gone wayward, I would almost be more supportive of saying that these, passenger vehicles and FP plates are seen like regular vehicles and don't have to pay $30 extra per vehicle per year to allow on-street parking, and that we should eliminate them from the commercial description and actually classify true commercial vehicles, and then those vehicles should pay an additional fee. And maybe the FP plates, if they're registered outside of Evanston and they're not paying our wheel tax, then maybe there is something that those vehicles should pay. But I think we've kind of lost what we're really, I think, trying to solve.
So if I may, the original ordinance was addressing the FP and the B plate, but then it's hard to determine what kind of B plate vehicles to behave on the street because it's all the way to the 8,000 pounds. So this can be a small pickup truck, but it can be like larger, not as humongous box truck, but it can be also the box truck. So it's very hard to put the guidance what kind of cars can or cannot park. We can only go by the license plate size, type. Because we have to enforce this somehow, some way, and only enforce this way was to by this plate type.
As currently drafted, I believe this would address the concern of Councilmember Ravel's constituent. Yes. So,
for example, right now, if you have let's say Toyota Prius, which was take-home car from the company, and you have a sticker of your company, right now you can purchase the tax, pay the wheel tax, pay the $30 for the permit, and then you can park in front of your house, and you can see massive.
So it solves the problem for some folks with commercial vehicles, not everybody. Yeah, and
well.
But for example, if you're a technician for, let's say, for one of the big stores, then you have a take-home van, then no.
Right. And I personally wouldn't be opposed to having them park, being allowed to park on the street, but that didn't pass council last time, so here we are.
That's correct.
Councilmember Burns?
I'm trying to find it here. So this would only be allowing cars, commercial vehicles with the FP plate.
And a passenger plate.
And a passenger
plate. And a passenger, yes. One per household permit.
Okay, so even if they had one of those like little vans that they don't stick out, you can't really tell, small little kind of small car, I don't know what to call it, a cargo van, but those small little vans. But it doesn't have an FP plate because it's not connected to some huge fleet. Maybe it's just I have a business and I got my regular car and I also have this little van that I use for whatever I do, a little handyman.
So most likely this van we have a B plate, and then you cannot apply for the permit.
Even the small ones?
Yep.
Would still need a B plate?
Every van required a B plate.
Not every van, but every work van, you're saying?
Any work van, yes.
Okay.
Any kind of vehicle who's made to make the money as a commercial required the B plate. The same like the pickup truck required the B plate.
So the use can also dictate whether or not you have a B plate or not. It's not necessarily the size of it?
No, because when you purchase the pickup truck, you cannot purchase the pickup truck with the regular plates. You automatically have
I know that for the pickup truck, but I'm saying a vehicle that's much smaller than that.
It's like Transit Connect, for example, the very small van also required the B plate.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess that's the individual I'm still, concerned about at this point that we're not really addressing, and we just really need more time with this. I think the concern is an enforcement one. It would be nice if we could say B plates up to this, weight, but I think from an enforcement standpoint, just saying that would be an enforcement nightmare. So I think we just need more time to consider this. But in terms of what's in front of us, what would be the impact to, I know, Chair, you also had a concern about the impact to like Lyft?
So
ride share drivers?
The impact would be that now, if I can answer for Lucas, is that rideshare drivers would now have to pay a $30 per vehicle per year fee to park on the street.
If I could speak to that point, Mr. Chair, one bit of text from the memo jumped out at me. Any vehicle, this is the definition of a commercial vehicle, any vehicle operated for the transportation of persons or property, et cetera, including a vehicle used in a ride-sharing arrangement when being used for that purpose. So that would seem to me, if you're to exclude a lift vehicle that is just parked overnight because it's not being used for that purpose?
Well, I mean, I think it means when it's being used in rideshare, period. But because no vehicle would ever be, if it's parked overnight, it would never be in use for commercial purposes during that time. So it'd almost be pointless for that language to be there.
Right, which is why this one stands out, because the other vehicles that are used for commercial purposes are excluded, like a commuter van, in commercial industrial enterprise for hire, not for hire, et cetera, et cetera. The ride-sharing arrangement is the only one where it specifically says we're being used for that purpose. So the way I read it.
Because the rideshare use the regular license plate.
Yeah.
Taxis and limo services require different type of the registration. So if the taxi cab owner has to have a TX license plate and the limo owner have to LY, so rideshare usually have the regular passenger plate.
And for the purpose of our ordinance, it counts as a commercial vehicle when it's being used by the Lyft driver to carry passengers.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because if you have stickers about advertising the
Lyft or Uber.
Yeah.
Yes.
But if it's also my car and I use it to go get groceries.
Can we have maybe legal chime in on, because I think this is a more kind of technical legal question. And Michelle, if you need a second to, okay.
Deputy City Attorney Michelle Zuriel. Good evening, Chair, members of the committee. Looking at the memo when it does state pertaining to the rideshare, it does say when being used for that purpose. I would have to agree that that would mean when the rideshare vehicle is operating as a rideshare vehicle, meaning using the app and transporting passengers, because a rideshare vehicle doubles as a personal vehicle. When it's not being used for rideshare purposes, it's being used for personal purposes. So if the rideshare vehicle is just parked, it would no longer be a rideshare vehicle at that point because it's not operating as such.
Well, if I can make a motion, I would like to clarify that language even more. And if that's the interpretation that we're having, I think we should just explicitly, there would never be a time, it's an impossibility that a rideshare vehicle is both being used for rideshare and parked on a street overnight. That's an impossibility that those two things happen at the same time. So I would just like to exclude, to explicitly say that rideshare vehicles do not count as commercial vehicles and exclude them, if that's the interpretation. Is that clear, Michelle? Do you know what okay, so I move that we would explicitly remove rideshare vehicles from the definition of commercial vehicles. Is there a second to that?
That might make sense in the context of this ordinance, but there are for other reasons, we may want to continue defining a rideshare vehicle as a commercial vehicle when it's being used like that.
Do we know another purpose? And is this not just the definition for this code? For this section?
No, I think this refers to pre-existing city code, which defines Illinois and city code, which define commercial vehicles.
Well, then, I mean, we can say then in that, then the language in this section of the code can say for the purposes of this ordinance, rideshare vehicles shall not be considered commercial vehicles.
Can we also just say, not including a community van, ride-sharing vehicles or whatever, like we can just...
When you say community van,
because right now it says a vehicle used in a ride-sharing arrangement when being used for that purpose. We can just cut the for the purpose and just say ride-sharing vehicle. Because it already says commuter vans is another one we're going to exclude. We're excluding commuter vans. We should exclude ride-sharing vehicles, or however we want to say it, and that's it. Or a recreational vehicle not being used commercially, and just end it.
I agree with that.
Okay.
If Michelle, Councilmember Kelly, are you to this
Quick
motion?
question. Limos, where do those fall? Like
They have a
limousine?
LY license plate.
Okay.
Just a delivery. I also want to remind the committee that we have a taxation for the ride sharing, so changing any kind of language about what the ride share is might also implicate later on how we collect the for the portion of the tax for the ride.
Yeah, I think we still want rideshare vehicles to be counted as commercial vehicles when they're being used like that.
And also when they park at night from 9 to 7 and they don't provide any services and they have no logos, like huge logo like thing, we don't have an issue.
But you wouldn't ticket them anyway. They don't. They wouldn't show up.
No, because
Right.
they have a regular license plate and no huge displication of any logos on stuff like this. So
To Councilmember Reed's point, within the text of the parking ordinance, we could just make that clarification.
That's what I'm saying, that we would, within this text, as Councilmember Burns I want to say alliterated, but that's not the word, as he just expressed. I think eliminating the sentence after, when used for that purpose, I think achieves that goal.
But when that sentence appears in the definition of commercial vehicle, not in.
Yeah, I was just trying to find it.
Oh, okay. Well, then
it's in the summary, but I don't see it in the code that we have here.
Okay, so then back to the motion that I was saying, which was in this code, in this ordinance, 30022, we would have add a provision that says, for the purposes of this code, of this section, I think is the correct language, Ms. Ozaribo, would be that a rideshare vehicle does not count as a commercial vehicle for the purposes of this code, correct?
And the way I'm looking at it here, if we look at page 148 of 219, this is section 10-4-5-2, paragraph B. I think what we're getting at there, any resident commercial vehicle with a valid residential parking permit, inserting other than rideshare vehicle, will need to obtain a commercial vehicle parking permit, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Where would that go once more? Where are you?
I'm on page 148 of 219.
What section of the ordinance?
10-4-5-2, which is section 1 of the ordinance.
Okay, section 1, okay.
10-4-5-2B. It seems like it might work.
Under residential permit parking areas?
Yeah. It might fit in somewhere else. I'm just looking at here.
Well, maybe
it's
in
probably
between.
not a good idea to.
What is this? Is this for consideration, or what is this?
This is going straight from this committee to council.
Maybe in between council, we could try to sort that out.
Ms. Ozaribo,
Need to vote on something
It's
now.
for introduction tonight, though.
It's going to council. It won't come back to this committee.
Mr. Chair, was your question how we could clarify that rideshare vehicles are exempt from application of, is it section A?
From having to obtain the parking permit and register their vehicle as a commercial vehicle. Manager Stonebeck.
I think staff has an understanding of what you're looking for, so I request that you just let us take this back, modify it, and bring it back for an introduction at the next meeting.
Okay.
Because we're already starting to run pretty long here.
Sure.
I'll make that motion to refer this. Well, what do I need to move?
Well, I think let's
refer this back to AMPW for next time.
Yeah. Well, let's make the amendments, because there's that amendment, and I think we should actually vote on that. So I think is there a second to the amendment that was just expressed by Director Stonebeck because if
I would, if you're going to make an amendment, I would, similar to what Mayor Biss does, I'd like it to be in writing so we know specifically what it is, and then that also helps when we go to city council to have it specifically in writing as well, so that the rest of the members understand what the amendment is. And if you want to email something to me and know where it is, otherwise, I suggest that we just hold this to the next meeting, allow staff, legal to revise the ordinance. If there's other concerns that you'd like us to address, that's fine too. But again, it's your option,
Yeah,
sir.
I'll motion to hold this then,
Second.
Or table.
or table.
Seconded by Councilmember Nusma. All those in favor of, well, there are, let me also be clear, there's one other item that I'd like to see included here, which is, I do think we need to address the B plate issue, because I think that's the big thing that we're seeking to address in the first place, larger vehicles. Councilmember Sufferton made the referral.
Councilmember Sufferman.
Yeah. So then, there's a parliamentary issue here. There is no mechanism for holding in our rules, but apparently tabling is just at the end of the meeting. I'm just going to go ahead and allow us to table it to the next meeting, as we've done in the past, and we'll go with that for now. So it's been moved by Councilmember someone and then seconded by another council member. All those in favor of tabling this to the next meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. The ayes have it. Okay, so we have a number of ordinances, A14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19.
Do we have to move these separately?
No, that's what I was going to say.
Okay.
I think we can move them all together. That's the rest of the agenda. So item A14 through A21, correct, Director Stonebeck? So may I have a motion for?
I'll make the motion on items A14 through A21. Would the chair like me to read them all into the record, or can we just?
I think we can. Overall, what's happening is we're putting pieces of land, of alleys up for sale. Is that a proper summation? Yeah. Simple summation. Okay. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Braithwaite. I'm sorry, Councilmember Burns. Is there any discussion on this? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. All right, so then we'll have Public Works begin in about...
Planning and Development.
I'm sorry, yes, Planning and Development begin in about 5 minutes.